Hello, this is Jack Olmsted, GMO Free News. I'm your host. I'm talking today with Melissa May. She's the founder of What Are We Fighting For? I'm in Port Townsend, Washington, and Melissa is in the great city of Flint. Flint, you've been hearing about Flint a lot, I'm sure, in the news because of a lot of things. One of the things is the water, and another thing is probably the mayor and the governor and this person that's called a emergency manager, whatever that is. But anyway, we'll get all into that. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
Christmas came early for you as an activist. Last week, wasn't it like the best week ever?
Honestly, it's overwhelming and exhausting, but yes, this was a great week. The blood results came back and showing that children still have high blood lead levels, meaning people are still consuming the water, which is horrifying and terrifying. And Mayor Weaver, she decided, I've had enough. This is not okay anymore. There was a 20-month-old who was sent to Detroit because his blood lead level was 50. Anything over 5 is blood poisoning, which means that he is still consuming the water, and at such a high level, we have no idea how he's going to come out. And it's terrifying. That's a baby. It's terrifying. So Mayor Weaver declared a state of emergency, and the media world blew up. So yeah, for somebody that like me that's been working on this for so long, it's awesome what's been happening to see Flint on the news every single day, and not because of murders or anything else, but because of what we have been fighting for. It's awesome.
So why don't you give people a sense of the background, your background? When did you start your fight?
We started our fight. We started What Are You Fighting For in January when we received the total trihalomethanes violation. Basically, we were told that for the previous 9 months, we had been in violation of the EPA's Safe Drinking Water Act. They did not tell us. They did not tell us what danger we were in. We had already had 3 boil advisories for ecoli in our water. And the fact that they hadn't told us that there was a carcinogenic, a cancer-causing byproduct in our water because they were using too much chlorine was horrifying to me. We were already paying the highest bills we've ever paid. We paid, I think, over $1,200 just last Christmas time for our water bills, and yet we were buying bottled water. The water smelled bad. It tasted bad. We were giving it to our cats. We were doing everything we could to avoid using the water, but unfortunately still cooking with it because we thought it was, safe to cook with because boiling was okay. Come to find out, it was already spiking in 2014 with lead. And that's scary. It's horrifying. We still don't know what's going to happen with that, with all of us being exposed. But we decided that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to stand up and we're going to fight. And the community members had reached out to Erin Brockovich, and somebody had given her my contact information. And she got me in contact with Bob Bocock, who has been in water treatment for 30 years. And she said, okay, we're going to get this figured out and see what's all happening. So I worked with him for several weeks before he said, it's a mess. You guys are in danger. It is a mess there. I'm going to come out at no charge. So he flew out. We had meetings on February 13th. And then on the 14th, we had our first big march. And it was 10 degrees, snowing, blowing sideways. And even after he, being from California, marched with us in the freezing cold, he gave a 2-hour presentation in a town hall meeting to the citizens and explaining to us basically, if you can see your water, if you can smell your water, if you can taste your water, if it tastes bad, it's not safe. There's too many chemicals in it. It's being overtreated, undertreated, whatever the issue is. So I decided to take all of the information I was gathering from Bob and Erin and just research that we were doing on our own. And my husband came up with the awesome name of What Are You Fighting For? And he started building the website with links to all of our research, health, science, anything we could find, any credible information we could find on this. And so we wanted to share it with everyone. And that was in January. So we just continued to march and protest and fight. And during this time, at one of the big, huge failures of a city hall meeting held by the city to continually promise us, hey, the water's safe. Don't worry about that carcinogenic byproduct. You're fine. And especially when the notice tells you that you need to consult your physician, who is obviously not a water expert, before consuming the water, that's terrifying. We knew it wasn't safe. So several of us started working really hard to get the truth out. And during this time, I had met Leanne Walters, and she had just awful discolored water. And so she had it tested, found out that she had 104 parts per billion of lead. The EPA max is 15. So she called me crying. I'm like, this is not right. We need to get it out to the media. So we tried. We sent it out to everybody. We got no response. So we had a clever idea to hold a press conference, and we did. We had a protest and press conference to get fluoride out of the water, because that was one of the things that Bob had pointed out. There's too much fluoride, and high fluoride mixed with high chlorine is just acid tearing up your pipes. And the fact that we had such high chlorine, high chloride in our water, it just was pure acid going through the pipes and tearing it up. And that's how the lead started leaching. So we did a surprise. And when we were talking to the news about the fluoride, grabbed Leanne, put her in front of the cameras, and I was like, tell them what's happening with your lead, because we all started doing we started doing research on lead and how dangerous it is. And this is in February of this past year. And it got blacked out. Nobody wanted to talk about lead. Even in February, the University of Michigan, the campus came out and said, we have lead in some of our taps. There are some buildings that have high lead, but we'll deal with it. They have their own water department and everything. So there's that. In March, Leanne had her next test done, because they continued to test. Found out her lead was 397. Horrifying. So what we had done was we printed up 4,000 door hangers, because I know my background is PR and marketing. So I tried to use every bit of promotions and add contacts and networking and background that I had to get the word out, because I wanted to educate people so they stopped drinking their water and saw a doctor and got their water tested. This was before we found out about the loopholes that the city and state were pulling on their testing to cheat. So we had a march in March, and we went, my kids and a few friends of mine, we went door to door and put these door hangers up that warned people that high lead has been found in the water. Get their water tested, go to the doctor, and then we talked about the common physical ailments that people were having. So we let people know, and that's one of our door hangers. We let people know that if you're having these issues, on the back of the door hangers, it gives the phone numbers to the health department, to the water department, to the mayor at that time, to the governor's office, to EPA Region 5, to Sheldon Neely, our state representative, to Congressman Kildee. So we gave everyone's phone numbers out and said, you need to call. We need to fight, because we weren't getting any response back. And there are people that have been writing all the way up to the president starting in 2014. And we weren't getting any coverage or any help. They just kept saying, the water's safe. Our tests, which we now know were completely flubbed, our tests show that the water's safe. So drink up. So we continued to fight. We continued to protest. In April, we had the 1-year anniversary of the switch. And we had a huge march. And that's when I met Kurt Goyette from the ACLU of Michigan and Kate Levy, who's a filmmaker. And they interviewed me with my children and came to our house. I introduced them to Leanne, and I'm like, listen to what she's got going. They actually took an interest. And there was several other people like Brittany Greason and Laura Gottlieb-Steiner, who actually came from outside of Flint and said, okay, what's going on here with the emergency management, the lack of democracy, the poisoned water, the high bills, the massive shutoffs, all these problems that's happening to us in Flint, they actually cared about. So they started writing about it. The New York Times came out in March, and luckily the timing was perfect, because they got to go to one of the citizen advisory meetings, which was a train wreck. Basically, the emergency manager told us that it was fine. And we asked him, why didn't you tell us, in the previous year, that they'd failed every single TTHM test since May of 2014, and the switch was in April. And he said, well, I'm telling you now. And that was amazing. And the fact that everything they talked about was money based. We can't afford to go back to Detroit. They lied and said there was a reconnection fee, which there was not. Sue McCormick from DWSD actually came up and said, no one from Flint has contacted me about reconnecting, but we will offer you a good deal since you are in an emergency situation. This was in January. And so all of this was completely horrifying. And so when the New York Times came out, they were very interested and then shocked once they heard what all was happening. I mean, the gentleman that's in the photo said straight out, nah, I'd rather drink pop than the water. And that's what you're told not to do. My kids to this day have not had caffeinated soda, but it was the water that poisoned them. When Leanne's 4-year-old came out with lead poisoning, it still didn't break, and it should have. It should have broken to be nationwide news. And then when my kids got diagnosed, it still didn't hit. And then we found out that recently with the blood tests, they're doing more to pad the numbers yet again. They're using finger prick testing, which is completely against what the CDC recommends for long-term exposure. So we just keep having all of these cover-ups. There was a huge media cap. The city and state at the time were in complete control of the media. Nobody really let our story out unless they were coming from the outside. And then when they did, when that New York Times article came out, I got attacked like crazy. People told me I was putting a black eye on this city and that it was fine and the city was doing the best that they could. And Leanne and I were told that God hates us because we were lying about the lead when we had our state water results, because I also had lead and copper in my water. So we fought and fought through all of this, having citizens attack us, having the state attack us, the MDEQ make fun of us and call us crazy moms, you're lying, you're making it up. And all of this kept going on and on, but we didn't stop. In May, I went down with a few of us. We went down to Detroit to the International Conference on Water and Housing, and I stood up and told Flint's story. There were people that lived in Ann Arbor, a half an hour, 40 minutes away, that had no idea and were completely horrified that we were suffering so bad, that we were screaming. Yes, that's me with my kids marching, that we were screaming for help, and nobody was listening and nobody was helping. And we were just getting called crazy. Even the doctors here didn't want to talk about it. They were told by the city. They were actually sent from Howard Croft a letter saying, if people ask about the TTHMs and all the problems in the water, here's what you should say, which is the water shows, or the tests show that the city's water is safe, that's safe as it comes out of the plant, everything is fine, which is completely illegal. You as the city should not be telling physicians how to speak and what to talk about. And so when we found out that we had copper and lead in our water and we had it in our blood, our doctors said, this is a first world country. We don't know how to treat copper and lead poisoning. It doesn't happen here. However, they didn't shut us down at that. They sent us to an environmental physician who unfortunately is not covered by insurance, but gave us detox medications, the right ways to eat. And that's one of the things that came out this week. That there are certain things that you can eat to help try to mitigate the damages caused by lead poisoning. And so we tried to do everything possible. We completely changed our diet. We're paying for all these expensive over-the-counter detox medications for fear for our children and for us. And of course, our health took it down. I mean, I am a case study. This is why they used me as one of the class representatives in the class action lawsuit, as well as the National Resources Defense Council lawsuit, because I'm so damaged. I've got neurological damage. I have physical damage. I have autoimmune disorders at this point. It's completely turned our life upside down. But we continued to fight and push and document everything. That we have received praise from people like, that's my tub, from filmmakers like Kate Levy, who I respect so well. She complimented us on how we documented. We took pictures of everything. We took videos. We documented everything we could. I had people sending me photos with their addresses. I made a huge map of problems with rashes and discolored water and just trying to see how widespread this was. And yeah, so Kurt and Kate have been amazing with also documenting and everything. So we have had for the longest time we didn't have help from the local or national media. This has been a recent change, which we're thrilled with. But we have we have been fortunate to have alternative media sources, well, like you guys, that are allowing us to speak the truth and get out what's happening to us as citizens. The biggest thing is that we got the data, thankfully, through Leanne's testing and her ridiculously unheard of high lead from her service line. She was able to get in contact with the EPA, Miguel del Toro, who's been an awesome part of all this. And he contacted Professor Edwards from Virginia Tech and said, we have a very bad problem here. And I'm worried because everybody was lying about having corrosion control put in. And thankfully, with the ACLU and Virginia Tech, they FOIA'd through the Freedom of Information Act. They found emails that showed the lies and the cover-ups that we did not, in fact, at all have corrosion control in place, which would have run $60 a day. Absolutely unheard of that they did this shortcut. So we've had them follow up Sid and Andrew. Everyone from Virginia Tech has been amazing. They've been covering this so well. And so when we were able to work with Kurt and Virginia Tech and the whole Coalition for Clean Water, which is Democracy Defense League and the Concerned Pastors for Social Action, Woodside Church, several different organizations, grassroots organizations, all joined together. And we started working in March to try to put an end to this. And we met with Trishelle Young, put in an injunction against the Flint River. And when we were approached by Kurt Guyette and Virginia Tech about doing the testing, you can see the test kits there. They sent us 300 test kits, which we got out. We got 300 test kits out, and then we got 277 back, which broke a record. And we were able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was, in fact, a widespread lead problem. And this started in August. In September, we held a press conference at Alana City Hall, September 15th. And I actually had local media come up to me and say, you know, when you first came to us, we thought, you know, she might be a little crazy. We don't know, you know, they're just upset. But they told me that every time they spoke to the city and the state, they had their tests to prove that we were wrong, that everything was safe, everything was fine. When in fact, the state's actual tests showed that the 90th percentile of the lead doubled from 6 parts per billion to 11 parts per billion. And let me reiterate, no level of lead is safe. Just because it's under 15 does not mean that it is safe. 0 is safe. Anything else is unacceptable. So they told me, they're like, okay, well, you proved us right. You proved that you're right. You've been right this whole time. And so finally we saw a turn with the local media, which just made me so happy. They actually put it on the front page. They said very favorable things about us instead of favorable things about the city and state. They started actually digging in to the city and state and asking why. They started doing their own FOIAs to get more information. And it was awesome. It was like a light at the end of the tunnel, sort of. That, okay, so the media finally realizes that what we've been screaming about since January is true. And that all of the work we've put in is actually coming to some kind of fruition. And so 9 days later, after our press conference, Hurley held a press conference with Dr. Mona, who's amazing. And she said, hey, we dug into this data that the health department has had in front of them the entire time. And there's a problem. Blood lead levels for the kids had doubled and even tripled in some areas. So they had the data, and the city and state, of course, tore her up. They tore up the hospital, saying that, you know, she spliced and diced data, and it was their own data. So it was right there in front of them the entire time. So in the media, it's been a huge media battle between Brad Werfel of the MDEQ, the names he's called us, the citizens, how he's spoken to us, how he's talked about Dr. Hannah Atisha and Mark Edwards and his team, and everything that's come across, how they talked about Kurt Guyette and how he's not going to go away and he's just bugging them. And I'm so thankful that he didn't go away, because without him digging and annoying them to death, he wouldn't have had the answers that he had. And the same thing with Mona. If she would have given up when they said, no, you're crazy, you can't release this information, because they didn't want them to hold their press conference. But they did. They did. They actually spoke up, and they confirmed everything that we had been yelling and screaming for 9 months. And even before then, when the citizens were saying the water smells bad, it tastes bad, it's too expensive, there's a problem here, what's going on? The city and state lied. Every chance they got, they lied. So thankfully, the media is now completely tearing them apart. And I couldn't be happier. Rachel Maddow, her tearing apart of Governor Snyder and interviewing Mona and Mayor Weaver has been a godsend. And it has been an explosion. I don't think I've ever talked to so many people in my life about what's going on, but I welcome it. And that's what people need to know, is that without the media, the national media blowing this up, it's still going to take forever. It would still take forever for us to fight. And I'm saying this from experience because I have been at this since January, and we have done everything possible to get the word out as citizens. We've done the research. We did the testing. We've held the countless educational meetings to educate the public and tell them, this is what you need to do. Don't drink your water, and this is why. And so we've talked to so many people to get this out. But now that worldwide media is jumping in, it's not for attention. We're not doing this for personal attention or a pat on the back saying, oh, good job. None of us are doing this during the interviews. What we are doing is saying, this is what's happening to us. We need help because our governor is standing in the way of help. And it's unfortunate that the fact we have not had democracy since 2011 in this city. So for our mayor to stand up against the city administrator who still thinks the water's fine, and our chief financial officer who sits there on the stand and says, the water's fine, I drink it every day, which is horrifying because lead, neurological damage, and she's in charge of our budget. It's unbelievable. And it's such a slap in the face to citizens who are living here suffering through this toxic water that she's like, oh, it's fine, I'm drinking it. And I just want to scream because they're standing in the way of us getting help. And the only help that we can even possibly fathom at this time is a replacement of these pipes, because until the pipes are they're so corroded at this point that they're going to continue to leach lead for no one knows how long. You know, there was original estimates by Virginia Tech and there's still lead in the water. And if there's still lead in the water, that means there's still corrosion. And I mean, it took 50 years to build up the biofilm we had. And since we're going to switch water sources again in June with the Karagandhi Water Authority, which is scary, we're going to go through this all over again. And the fact is that they flushed hydrants, and the EPA had said you can't do that when there's a huge corrosion problem. So now there are people seeing discolored water who have never seen this before. And so my advice to everyone is to post it, send it to me. I'll blast it, send it to the news, just push and take videos, take photos, document everything. Which one will help us with the lawsuit? It'll help them prove their damages. It'll help everybody if you document everything. But two, the world needs to see what's happening to us, because if it can happen here when we're surrounded by 20% of the world's fresh water, it can happen anywhere. And we're finding out, I'm having people message me from across the country. They're having the same problems. Their DEQ is lying to them, their state's lying to them, their city's lying to them, their mayors, their city councils are lying to them when they're saying the water's not safe. So this is a countrywide, probably a worldwide problem, because our infrastructures have been neglected. So the more people we can reach by any interviews, by any means possible, the better, because we need to band together. We need to push the EPA to tighten the lead and copper rule to protect people, because they just agreed with a work group to lessen it, which is, especially after what's happened to us, it's horrifying. So we need to get on the EPA and say, you need to do your job, and you need to push the MDEQ or the DEQ of whatever state to do their job and keep these cities in line. Because without proper treatment and monitoring and testing, and all these states are using loopholes to lower the numbers they're getting back, which completely blows my mind, everyone's in danger. And I'm not doing this to be a fear monger or whatever. It's just the reality and the science of it. Old infrastructure, highly caustic, overtreated water. Guess what? Things are going to get torn up. And when metals get torn up, you're going to get lead, copper, aluminum, tin, chromium, and so many other metals, which are all neurotoxins and all damaging to your body, to your pets, to your appliances. It doesn't need to happen. It's 2015. They took lead out of paint in the 70s. They took it out of gasoline. It's still in our water. We need help. So we do. I mean, I know I'm kind of going on, but the reason we do want the media's help, we need the media's help. We need to do these interviews is to alert people of what has happened to us. No democracy, poison water, high rates, 2,500 shut-off notices went out for poison water. This is wrong. What's happening to us, what's happening to the citizens of Flint is wrong, but we're not the only ones. This is happening all over the place. Look what happened in Pontiac. Look what happened in Flint. And look what happened in Detroit. Look at what's happening when you take democracy away. The last thing we want is for any other state to think, hey, that's a great idea. Let's get an emergency manager to run everything. Because look how it failed here. Here's our joke from earlier. How many emergency managers does it take to poison 100,000 people? 4.5, because we still have a city administrator who is basically a mini emergency manager and reports to the governor. There's the joke. 4.5. And it takes one governor to help us, but it also takes one governor to sit on it because he's known for so long about what's going on. We went to his office twice and showed them the test results, the maps, what's going on before Virginia Tech even sent us the kits. And nothing happened. He did nothing to help us. He sent 1,500 filters to the concerned pastors, told them, you better not tell them where it's coming from. And so in hopes of getting more filters for the rest of the citizens, they had to keep their mouths shut. And people tear them up for that, but I was there. They were told not to say something because they were hoping that they'd get more filters. And now we have the filters, and they're sitting in a warehouse because people can't go get them. People don't have cars. People can't make it to the meeting times. They can't make it to City Hall during those hours because they work. It's such a mess. So we do need the media to get this out to everyone, because then maybe somebody who's an expert can jump in and help us. Maybe we can put enough pressure on the governor to say, hey, you know what? Whether we voted for you or not, I didn't, help these people. You did this. You allowed this to happen. With an emergency manager, the final sign-off had to come from the governor's office. The final approval had to be done by the governor. So you did this. So fix it, and fix it now. Don't sit on it. And, people are getting sicker by the day. And so, yeah, I mean, this past week, long story short, this past week has been an amazing, amazing flood of interviews and media contacting us from around the world. And it's great because they need to hear the effects of lead and how dangerous it actually is instead of it being brushed to the side. So now pretty sure I've told my personal medical history and my kids to as many people as possible. Invasion of privacy, maybe, but I don't want another family to go through this. If this can be prevented, which it can, I don't want to see anyone else suffer like we have. And so that's number one right there. So I'm opening up my life to the media and to whoever listens to hear how much we're struggling, how hard my kids have it right now, and all the things I'm going through. I had to fill out an Americans with Disabilities Act form for my work because I miss so much work. And it's all caused by water. And that's what I want people to hear, is that it's something that is necessary to live. It's been treated like a commodity. The choice by these emergency managers and our governor to pick profit over people, that needs to stop. It needs to stop. It's happening everywhere, and it needs to stop. So I welcome the media. I'll take the heat for being on camera. I don't care, because as long as people hear about what's happening to us, they can protect themselves and they can stand up with us. And that's what we need. So
Can we go through the media list on the Google Sheets?
Yes. Oh,
Starting, there's like over 70 articles that were written about this last week. And if you look at the previous week, I think the number was around 10.
yes.
So here on line 78 right now, on the 14th, which was the Monday, why don't you talk about this article here, the very first one that I have on the list, that came from the Flint Journal, MLive. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. So this is what the week started out with, this article.
Yes, and that's it's fantastic that it came out and talked about how the lead damage is irreversible, because it is. So the fact that they remind people that it's not just eating paint chips, it's not just from work areas, it is lead poisoned water. That is something that needs to be pointed out, as Governor Snyder himself said in the Rachel, well, not in the Rachel Maddow interview, but it was referred back to, that he was saying we need to look at all the other sources. I'm sorry, it's the water. So I was happy to see that MLive was putting out that, yes, it is the lead poisoned water. And the fact that FEMA stepped in and sent bottled water, and people can go to the local agencies and get it. That's a sign that, hey, there's a problem. People shouldn't be drinking the water. So here's some bottled water. Here's bottled water. Please don't drink the water. I was thrilled with the fact that they were comparing how many children had elevated lead levels. And again, remember that your lead levels the lead starts to break down in your system after 48 hours of initial exposure. So initial exposure for us could have started in 2014. So the fact that there are still kids with elevated lead levels, you don't know how high it actually was. And that's scary, because over time, the lead will break down and go into your bones, your organs, your brain, things like that. So it's not going to test as high in your blood. And that's why I've told people, if your lead levels aren't 0, there's a problem. You need to get checked for other things. The first thing is start with a complete blood panel. A complete blood count and complete metabolic panel. That's how my doctor found out what was going on with me. So, and it talks about in Detroit at 5 zip codes, more than 700 children tested positive in 2013. And then in Grand Rapids, they talked about 1 in 10 children tested positive. And it talks about lead and how bad it is. However,
so here, okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Here's a second article that appeared in the Flint Journal MLive on Monday, the 14th. It was about the mayor, the new elected mayor, the first female mayor elected to the city of Flint last month before the city council. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. This was fantastic because she went to city council meeting, and I heard there was great resistance for her to actually call the emergency, but she did. She declared it a state of emergency, and the city council voted with her 8-0. So that means something. That was also a breath of hope that our elected officials were finally stepping up, saying, hey, yeah. And for her to make such a big declaration 30 some days into office, that's huge.